just beyond our reach.
It's like opening your eyes. For the first time, after living in the dark.
Your rage blinds you.
Rage is all I have left. The Covenant will not stop.
What else are you willing to sacrifice?
Everything. What's the point in saving humanity if we're gonna give up our own?
I don't know where to begin. Let's unfortunately get into it.
Silver Team, on me. We're all we have now. It's just us.
Okay, so this is kind of a sad video because for the longest time I've been wanting to find a live action Halo project that I could introduce to non-gamers, because ever since I joined the Halo franchise years ago, I was hooked. I mean, I won't say I'm the most diehard fan ever, but it was exceptional sci-fi storytelling, in my opinion. And so, as I was continuing on with the series, I started looking for any type of live-action type of Halo content that I could introduce to non-gamers, because if you're a gamer, you know that there is a lot of content out there that is incredible storytelling, but there's a lot of people who haven't experienced it because it's a video game. And yes, gaming is one of the fastest growing industries in the world right now, but still there are those people who just don't play video games. And so for those type of people, I like to try and find live action content that they can see. And we kind of gotten some of that with like Halo 4 Forward Unto Dawn, or Halo Nightfall, which I am working on a review on. And so I've been looking for live action Halo content to introduce to non-fans of the series. And there have been failed movie attempts, which is unfortunate because some of those seemed very promising. And finally, in 2013, nearly 10 years ago, we're at 9 years since that announcement, they revealed that yes, we're working on a Halo live-action series. Steven Spielberg was attached at some point, and I don't even know if he's still attached anymore, but yeah, that happened. We heard nothing of it. There was kind of like this weird murmuring that like Halo Nightfall was actually the start of that series, and it was actually going to be like a series of films, or it was going to lead into the series, and that turned out not to be true. And so, yeah, we finally started hearing that they were filming it, and I was getting very excited because for 20 years, we have never seen a live-action project where Master Chief was the star. I mean, think about that. Just consider that for a moment. Imagine for 20 years they've been talking about doing a live-action Sonic movie, or a live-action Zelda movie, live-action, just name your franchise of choice, and for those 20 years, they've only been Link or Sonic have only been a guest cameo, and there's never been a project focused solely on them. And so, yeah, I was getting excited for the show, and then there was kind of rumors that, yeah, Master Chief's just going to be a side character in this show, which made me very concerned, because it's like 20 years we haven't seen a solo Master Chief project. Be kind of nice to finally get one. And so, when it comes to this show, I absolutely hated it. I mean, it was just, to me, a piece of fine-tasting garbage. Now, for people who haven't seen the show, or correction, for people who haven't played the games, they might enjoy this, but even then, there's reasons that they're not even going to be able to really enjoy this to the extent they could have. And so the best analogy I can use for this situation is, imagine if you put yourself in this scenario. Now imagine you've never done any driving of any kind, and I bring you a go-kart, a little tiny go-kart, and I show you how to drive it, and you're tooling around in this little tiny go-kart, and you're having a blast, and you're content with that. Imagine this show's that go-kart, and imagine the original game series is a C8 2023 Corvette. Go-kart, Corvette. That is the difference between the show and the original game series. And honestly, if you're thinking of being over dramatic, just one thing I want to let you know is that the developers, creators of this series freely admit that they never looked at the original games when making this show or writing it. They didn't even look at them. They just used encyclopedias. Now, I have a Halo encyclopedia on my bookshelf over there, and it's no longer to date. It's an antique encyclopedia, so it's not current. There's a lot of missing information out of it. So I have to suspect maybe they were using antique encyclopedias because they liked how the cover looked. It should always be a major red flag if some creator or artist says they didn't even bother looking at the original source material. That should be your sign to run for the hills as fast and as far as possible from whatever they're making. Case in point, Pedro Pascal is going to be in the new Last of Us live action series, and he said, yeah, I've never played the games, never really was into the story, but I watched my nephew play a couple minutes of it. And a lot of people have been trying to cover this shit sandwich with, well, I don't want it to adapt that character. I want this to be me and my character. And yeah, the fact that people are still trying to use that as a argument for being better is shocking to me. Like, quite frankly, people want to see these characters come to life. They don't want to see you pantomiming them. And so when they announced that, yeah, they didn't even bother looking at the original games when making this, was probably the death nail, and I was just in denial watching all 9 episodes. Again, this isn't entirely against them, but is against Paramount. The fact that I had to wait a week in between each episode was absolutely ridiculous. Netflix ruined that. I am sick and tired of shows forcing me to wait a week in between each and every single episode. Just freaking release it already. Okay, they released Reacher all at once, I noticed, which I was kind of surprised by. And hey, well, you know, I enjoyed Reacher. But this, yeah, I had to wait a fucking week in between every episode. Now, if the episodes were well paced, then that wouldn't be a problem. But each episode drags and drags and drags. The pacing is horrific in this show. Quite frankly, they could have done this entire series in 3 to 4 episodes if they just cut out the useless garbage in this show. And so not everything is terrible with the show. The first episode started off very promising. Okay, it starts off following this girl by the name of Quan. Okay, she's on this planet. People are talking about how there's like civil war between these individual colony planets and the UNSC, and you know, life's going on as normal, and then just out of nowhere the Covenant attack. She has no idea what's going on. It's brutal, and it's a pretty good intro. It's a nice intro for people who are not familiar with the series. And then the problems begin, because one is once that attack is over, every character in the show starts just referring to them as the Covenant. Oh, the Covenant this, the Covenant that, the UNSC. Just, they start talking about like everyone's on the same page. And the fact of the matter is, this show never explains what the Covenant is. You heard me right. They never explain acronyms or what little tiny things are. Like they mentioned the Cole Protocol in this series. Never explain what that is to a non-Halo fan. If you've read the books or played the games, you might know what the Cole Protocol is, or you might know what the Covenant are, but just going in fresh in the show, they never explain any of it. Once that first encounter with the Covenant happens, they just expect you to know what everything is, why the Covenant look different from each other. They never explain any crucial need-to-know information. Does this seem like a problem to just an average moviegoer? It does, doesn't it? I literally had to explain to a person what the Covenant was with this show. So, the fact that they didn't even bother explaining the lore that they were even showing themselves shows how poorly written this show is. Okay, if they had done an attempt at trying to explain stuff to people who are not familiar with this series, then yes, you could make the argument that, oh yeah, no, the writers did the best they could. But no, the writers literally did not put any effort into this show. They did a half-assed job. How do I know this? Because they didn't bother fucking looking at the original source material. And I have more examples of this to come in this video. Now, the opening episode wasn't the only thing I enjoyed for the most part. Like, the opening of that first episode wasn't the only thing I enjoyed. Another thing that was pretty good for a TV show was the production value. Yes, there was some shoddy CGI, there was also some really good CGI, but I mean, it was a TV series. And so, yeah, I was perfectly happy with the way the production value was on the show. Some of the locations felt pretty good. Now, not all is perfect, because they literally have people using AK-47s and driving Chevy Tahoes, which, if you're familiar with this universe, you'll know that Halo takes place 500 years in the future. So yes, while a Chevy Tahoe and an AK-47 today would work, imagine having a group of people just anywhere on the planet today using those antique rotary flintlocks that have these huge mechanisms from the 1500s that literally you had to like crank back, and then it would spin around, hit the flint, and it would fire off. It's a one-shot thing. Basically, just imagine if you had some town using chariots and those in the American Midwest. Like, it would just feel super out of place. And I'm not the only person that complained about this. So you see a lot of just modern day weapons in a show that already had established futuristic weapons for both human and Covenant, and so it just always rips you out of the experience. There's this one Spartan who constantly uses a Rhino revolver. If you don't know what that is, it's a revolver that kind of looks futuristic, and its barrel is not on the top, it's on the bottom. They've used these in sci-fi films before, but quite frankly, it always took me out of the experience that a Spartan would be using a 6-shot revolver. So, just little tiny things rip you out of experience like that. Apart from that, the production value is pretty nice. So, credit where credit's due there. And then in terms of casting, I do like the actress they got for Dr. Halsey. I thought, yeah, she's a pretty decent pick for Dr. Halsey. Maybe she needs a little bit more wrinkles in her face. Maybe you should have, not gotten a former model to play Dr. Halsey. But hey, with the hand we're dealt, she was probably the best casting job in this entire show. And that's pretty much about it with the things I liked about this show. Yes, there are 3 combat scenarios in this show. First episode, then one halfway through the series, and then one in the final episode. Those were pretty entertaining. But the problem there is you're talking about a series that was entirely focused on action, and for 9 episodes, there's only 3 battles. What do they fill the rest of the time with? I'm glad you asked. If you are watching this right now, they basically just fill the rest of that time with talking. And talking. And more talking. And more talking. And talking and talking and more talking. Yeah. And so I'll get back to that in a little bit. I need to finish on the casting. Pablo Schreiber was okay as Master Chief when he was in the helmet and in the suit. The problem is, for the 8 hours and 30 minutes you get of this series, you only ever really see Master Chief, the suit, and the helmet on for about, give me a second here, carry the 4, minus the 2, 19 minutes. Yeah, you heard me right. Like 19 minutes out of this entire series, you actually see Master Chief. For the rest of the show, you're just seeing Pablo Schreiber walking around. Not even in the suit. He's just walking around in regular clothes. And what's funny is they do a decent job showing the height difference of Spartans with humans when they're in those suits, because they can put like lifts in their shoes and all. But whenever Pablo Schreiber is walking around, he's like the same height with everyone else. And so it just, again, rips you out of the experience. And in the original games, you never see Master Chief out of the helmet. This is the same problem that happened with Judge Dredd 1996. Now, I kind of laughed that off with my review of that movie, but I did point out that many fans were furious that they had Judge Dredd remove his helmet. The same thing applies here, and a lot of people have been trying to defend it like, it's a good thing that Master Chief took off his helmet because it adds character. Yeah, if you see any articles that write like that, stop reading them. Okay. Yeah, a lot of people are trying to argue like, well, you could see his eyes at the end of the legendary campaign on Halo 4. Not the same thing, brother. Okay. And then people said, well, they describe how he looks in the books. That is drastically different. Please stop using the books as an excuse for why this show sucks. Okay? The books are much better than this show. So stop trying to pull the books down with this show. And then, like, one of my biggest problems with the casting was with 3 other characters. Okay? So I have a very good question. Why was Jacob and Miranda Keyes black? And before you turn off this video because of some weird belief that I'm being super racist right now, I have a better question for you. Why was Cortana white? Please answer me that question. Why was Cortana, a character that has never been depicted as white before, white? I would like to know. Because the character, from what I could tell, was 100% CGI. So it wasn't like it was an actress that they had wearing a suit and it's like, well, we can't put makeup on her skin because she'll have an allergic reaction. No, I'm like 99% sure that was a CGI character they had playing Cortana. And for some weird reason, she's not blue, she's not purple, like she's been depicted in some games. No, she's white. Yeah, her suit's blue, and there's a blue glow to her, but her face is bright, bright white. Why? Why? I thought whitewashing was a very horrible thing to happen in Hollywood. Why are we still doing it? I'd like to know. And there has always been the argument that the reason why they make some characters black is to add more diversity to a show. Okay, fair point. But why would you make two characters that were originally white black and remove a character, a black character from the games? That was an amazing character, and that character is Sergeant Johnson. Sergeant Johnson, next to Master Chief, is probably one of the most beloved characters of the Halo series, next to Master Chief and Cortana. I mean, people love Sergeant Johnson, and they just completely removed him from the series. He's nowhere to be found in this show. So you can't make the argument that, oh, well, we made Jacob and Miranda Keyes black because there wasn't enough diversity in the show. Because you had not only the Spartan, I believe his name was Sorn, who ran away. Not only was he black, but you also had Sergeant Johnson you could have brought into the show, and people would have loved him because he is a very badass, awesome character. And you just completely axed him from the show. Oh, no, wait. We're going to introduce him in Season 2. Why didn't you just introduce him in Season 1? Okay, and look, there were times when I'm perfectly fine with a race swap. Case in point, the Batman. Not only was I perfectly fine with Zoe Kravitz playing Catwoman, I absolutely loved Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon. Okay, when the actor overcomes the glaring difference from source material to screen adaptation, then I can live with it. I was perfectly happy with Michael Clarke Duncan as Kingpin. Yes, I do like Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin, but, you know, I thought Michael Clarke Duncan, especially in the director's cut of Daredevil, was a good choice for Kingpin. And I absolutely loved Will Smith as Floyd Lawn in The Suicide Squad. I thought, oh, yeah, he completely sold me on that. So it's not that it's impossible to do a race swap for a character. But when you do it for characters that the actors don't even really do a good job doing, it's just, you're left questioning why. And like, the guy playing Jacob Keyes doesn't even capture what Jacob Keyes originally was. When the first game came out, Jacob Keyes came off as a stern but understanding commander. And while this never happened, there's a scene in the Halo TV show that did happen where all these military commandos are sitting around this table discussing what to do about Master Chief because he kind of goes off of plan. He kind of does something that they don't understand, and Jacob Keyes in the games probably would have gone, I believe we should bring in Master Chief and question him on why he did what he did. And maybe then we can determine what the best course of action is, because perhaps maybe Master Chief knew what he was doing, and he was doing something for the betterment of the entire UNSC. How he acts in this show is more like, oh yeah, let's just kill him. Yeah, we should kill him. If he's going off script, let's kill him. Don't ask any questions, just kill him. I mean, it's just a glaring difference from the Jacob Keyes in the video games. And what's even worse is Miranda Keyes. This is probably the thing that got caught in my mind the most, was how they completely assassinated the character of Miranda Keyes from the video games. Now, in the video games, Miranda Keyes is the commander of her own ship. She is a cocky commander that literally in the second game wanted to go after a Covenant ship twice her size because she just wanted to get him on a run. Alright, she literally in the games was willing to pick up 2 submachine guns, go into battle with her men, and she even risked her own safety for the entire universe. I am not being hyperbolic. She literally did that at the end of Halo 2. So, you have the recipe of a perfect, badass female character. And what do? They basically turn her into someone who's just always screaming, "Let me look at it. It's not fair. I don't get a look at this special object. No one's treating me with respect. It's not fair. I'm a scientist. I want to look at it." Like, honestly, this goes back to the main problem. If the writers and creators just bothered looking at the fucking games, they would have known, oh, there's a really great black diverse character that people love, and there's this really great strong female character that people love. Instead, they just said, oh yeah, screw the games, and like, oh, well, we got a series, yeah, we need more diversity, so we'll race swap these characters, and yeah, we'll make this completely original character a strong female character, and oh, who's that? Miranda Keyes? Yeah, we'll just make her a scientist. You think the writing didn't go down like that? Think again. Yeah, she's not even a commander of her own starship. Which sounds more badass? Commander of a starship or scientist? Which one? Scientist, works by herself, or the commander of hundreds of men on a starship? I'll wait. Yeah. So the writers ruined Miranda Keyes. They didn't do a good job on Jacob Keyes. Okay, they completely axed Sergeant Johnson, which just blows my mind. Okay, they do a terrible job on Master Chief because he doesn't really act like Master Chief ever. They do these weird things, like they have these like emotion caplets in the back of Spartans that prevent them from having any emotions, which never happened in the games. Stupid. Alright, they completely convolute Cortana's origin, where it's like, oh yeah, she's supposed to take over the mind of Master Chief. It's like, where are you getting any of this from? You're overcomplicating things. They overcomplicated things in this show for the sake of just being complicated. And like, another question I have is, why were there only 4 Spartans? Throughout this entire show, they keep talking about how, like, oh yeah, we have, you know, the Spartan Corps, and they only ever show 4 Spartans. Yeah, there's a 5th one out being a pirate that we meet, but in the UNSC, there's only 4. And yet in the video games, there were dozens. Okay? Especially on Reach. And yet we never see those. Like, seriously, you could have just CGI'd a couple walking in the background, and it's like, oh, okay, there are some other Spartans, but no, in this universe, it's only 4. Which, I'm so sick and tired of people using the argument, well, it's an alternate timeline. Like, oh, so that's why it's shit? Like, seriously, that's why this story is terrible, because it's alternate timeline? Like, that is the most lame excuse I've heard for this show. It's like, oh, well, it's an alternate timeline, so obviously it's going to be different. Yeah, no, that's no excuse for it being crap. And then they add in completely new characters that were never in the original series, like Quan and Maki. And Quan, sure, I get having a brand new character so you could explain stuff to not only them, but the audience, hence a witch's cauldron, but they don't even do that. And like, honestly, I would have enjoyed Quan if she was not a little dick all the time and just wasn't a brant stopping around the entire time. If Quan was introduced as like a brand new Spartan recruit that Master Chief had to train, people would have loved that. It's like, oh, okay, this would work. But no, the people writing this are idiots who didn't even bother looking at the original source material. If you're planning on adapting a popular IP into a series or a movie, I have a couple of very complicated suggestions for you. This will be really hard, but it will help you out. So you're going to want to get something called a computer. These might be hard to find. Then you want to, this is going to be really hard now, type in www. The dot's important, YouTube, spell out YouTube, don't use shorthand, dot, that second dot's important, com, C-O-M. A lot of people screw that up. Then, in the little bar at the top, you want to type in, for example, Halo 1 cutscenes. And then play. Now, I understand that's really hard to do. You would need a master's in physics and aeronautics to be able to do that. But if you can do that, you'll be able to create a good adaptation of an IP to a movie or TV series. Now, if you need a 7-part course explaining how to do this in detail, I'll be glad to oblige you. Hopefully you all realize I'm being really fucking sarcastic right now. Like, that's all you have to do is fucking YouTube the cutscenes, and these people couldn't even be bothered to do it. And then another thing I could not stand was this show was trying way too hard to be Game of Thrones. Like, to a point of being pathetically lame. Like, it just wanted to be the next Game of Thrones. But it's just so fucking boring. Like, literally, most of the show is just military commanders, like, just bickering. Like, well, you can't do that because that'll make me lose standing in favor with the committee. And I need to have better standing with the committee than you. And I can't let you do that. It'll make me look bad. And it's just like, your species is being wiped out. Fucking cut this bullshit, okay? Like, it is just, none of this is helping anything. This is just a waste of time, and it's most of the series. You could remove 80% of this show, re-edit it, and you could still tell the same story without losing anything. And then there's also an unnecessary sex scene in this show that did nothing. It's just, oh, I forgot they're trying to be Game of Thrones. And then there's this really bad moment where this, like, guy who's, like, the baron of this planet, he's, like, in this pool smoking a cigar, buck-ass naked, which, yeah, it really sends a message, smoking a cigar in a pool, but it's so fucking impractical. You get ash everywhere. If you don't pick up the ash in time, it starts looking like a turd. And then you also have to worry about the drink, and if you get the cigar wet, it's fucking ruined. And then you're trying to keep your arms above the water. I know this from experience. And then, like, he's talking to this assassin, and then he just walks out of the water where she has to see his junk, and it's like a power move. It's just like, I don't even think shit like this worked in Game of Thrones, and yet it's not working here. Honestly, if you want Game of Thrones in space, watch The Expanse. At least the science and the lore works better in that show than here. Because this is the shittiest Game of Thrones knockoff I've ever seen. And then, like, that sex scene. Basically, I did not need to see Master Chief having sex. I didn't need to see that. If I wanted to see that shit, I would Google Master Chief Rule 34 on Google. Okay? I could have seen all that I want. I don't do that. I don't like seeing beloved characters from my childhood having fucking sex. Okay, it's really not my thing. Maybe it is for some people, but those people can always Google Master Chief Rule 34 if they wanted to. Kids, don't Google that. Please, don't. Stop. And then, like, lastly, they wanted this to be Game of Thrones so bad, but something that they forgot about is, with Game of Thrones, I know people who could not stand that show. Like, literally, they hated every aspect of that show. But at the very least, they could agree unanimously with everyone else in the world That opening theme song is pretty fucking sick, though. I mean, like, the music to Game of Thrones is incredible. Say what you will about the show, I have my problems with the show, but that opening theme song just pulls you into that universe whenever you watch that opening. It's a long opening, and anytime I watch that show, I would always watch the opening because that theme song is incredible. Halo, in their infinite wisdom, they decided not to use the original music, which is considered some of the best music in gaming history. It's incredible. They decided to just use this generic, uninteresting music for the show. There's a couple of the keynotes of the original music peppered throughout the show a couple of times to kind of like try and remind you, hey, remember that this is supposed to be Halo. Okay, let's go back to the boring generic music that you will not be humming to yourself when you're doing chores tomorrow morning, unlike Game of Thrones. But we want to be Game of Thrones so bad though. And like, look, there's the argument that the music was being debated in court with the original composer and Microsoft. Yes, that was going on when the show happened. But halfway through the show, that was settled, and Microsoft got access to the music again. So when that happened, a good idea would have been to go into post-processing and replace all of that generic lame music with the great original music that people love so much. You had the time to do it. You had a week break in between every episode. You could have done it in between that. But they didn't do it because they didn't care about this show. And like, this show desperately needed a Peter Jackson. Now, I won't say I'm the biggest Lord of the Rings fan. I wouldn't even say I'm a casual Lord of the Rings fan. I've watched the 3 original trilogy movies, had fun with them. Other aspects I wasn't nuts about. Didn't care for the Hobbit films. I haven't read any of the books that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote outside of the trilogy, so I would not call myself even a casual Lord of the Rings fan. But one thing I can acknowledge is this. Peter Jackson loved those books. He loved that series, and he went in with a goal in mind. He wanted to make the best adaptation he could of a series he loved. The people who made this show did not care about this series. They didn't even bother looking at the original games. Just think about that for a second. They didn't bother looking at the original games. So, quite frankly, the only reason why I stuck with this show was because of my desire to just see any live action Halo. And so yeah, I was willing to sit through this useless crap. I mean, maybe one day we might get a decent live action Halo, but this is not it. And quite frankly, if you want to experience Halo, maybe just go play the first game and you'll have a better experience than this poorly paced, very convoluted mess of a soap opera that just took sprinklings of a great IP and tried calling it that. So, before you go, please remember to, do the thing. The thing. My name is Christopher Connor with 11 Hour Reviews, and unfortunately, that is all.